Peter Drucker said you can't manage what you don't measure. If you're not measuring your results, then you can't manage your results. That's why you would track things like how much calories you're eating or how much money you're spending. If you're not tracking it, if you're not measuring it, then you're not managing it. And if you're not managing it, you can't improve it. There's a really cool concept actually called Pearson's Law. And according to Pearson's Law, whatever you measure improves, and whatever you measure and report back improves exponentially. So you got to measure something to improve it. But if you measure something and then report it regularly, like to an accountability partner or someone else, then it's going to improve exponentially. In this video, I'm going to share with you the best example of someone I've seen who's measured their own progress. It's actually James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits. On his blog every year for the last several years, he's created annual reviews and he's been very explicit about his measurements. Again, if you're not measuring, you can't manage it. And James Clear has become one of the most successful authors over the last 5-10 years. And I'm going to show you his annual review process is one of the most amazing ways that he's been able to measure and track his own progress forward. And I heavily recommend you do this. I'm also going to start really quickly with a story, why you should do this. So one of my friends, Jill, she is a physical therapist at an elementary school for children with challenges like Down syndrome, like disabled kids who have a really hard time learning and stuff like that. Jill works with these kids one-on-one and they set goals, and it's obviously difficult work. A lot of times they make seemingly no progress. Like these kids are really hard to make progress on. And recently Jill was actually looking at one of her annual reviews. Every year at the end of the year, she writes about the goals that they're setting, the progress. She actually tracks a lot of things throughout the year. But with one of the little girls that she is working with, she took some time to just look back on the progress report from last year. And one of the things that she noticed is that last year at this time, this little girl, they were working on her walking on grass. This little girl couldn't walk on grass or uneven surfaces. It was just too hard for her, too intimidating. And it was powerful for Jill to read that because that's actually challenges that this little girl and Jill have overcome a long time ago. But Jill had completely forgotten about it. And so by going back and reviewing her progress and reviewing what they were working on last year, she was reminded of what they were actually doing, which it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to forget what you were doing last year because as people, we're very focused on what's in front of us. We're focused on our future. It's easy to forget or even downplay your own progress. And there's reasons why you should not only record your progress, it helps your memory, but review your progress regularly, because by reviewing your progress, like Jill just did, you're reminded of what you were focused on maybe 1 year ago, 5-10 years ago. And by seeing the things that you've probably forgotten, you probably forget the things that you were working on 2-3 years ago. You forget how challenging it was. So the thing about this is that really your memory is always being reconstructed in the present. If you have new experiences, you learn things, you quickly slow boil and adapt to your new views, your new circumstances, and from the present, you view the past. We always reconstruct the past in our memories based on where we're at in the present, and so your memories are actually always changing based on where you're at right now in the present. And so it can be really easy to forget where you actually were. Just as an example, like I was reading one of my old journals when I was writing this book, actually, Willpower Doesn't Work. And I remembered how difficult this was. I actually, according to my actual memory, when I'm not actually reviewing the progress, I actually thought it was easy. But I went back and I was reading some of my old journals and I realized, whoa, it was a lot harder than I remember it being. And so you want to take time to look back because it does a few things. First off, it builds hope, it builds confidence. It helps you really appreciate where you're at right now. And appreciating where you're at right now is obviously super important for being mindful, happy, joyful. This is just a strategy not only for building your confidence, your hope, but it does bring you happiness. Feeling progress makes you happy. Seeing progress makes you happy. It also builds your confidence. There's a lot of research that shows that your confidence is actually the byproduct of former progress, former success. And so by taking the time to look at your former progress, by taking the time to actually celebrate your wins, your confidence is going to skyrocket. And there's actually a lot of research on this. BJ Fogg talks about the importance of celebration. Taking the time to look back at where you were before, being blown away at the progress you've made and stuff that you've actually forgotten. That gives you celebration, it gives you confidence, it gives you hope. And that's a lot of the things that happened for Jill. When she was looking at this girl's report and seeing and remembering what they were actually working on a year ago and realizing that they are completely past that. They're working on new challenges and remembering, wow, this little girl used to struggle walking on grass. It was just too intimidating for her, and now she can totally do that. That also gave her a lot of pride and made her proud of this little girl and made her love her more, and it gave her motivation to do her work. One of the things you want to do when you're measuring back on your progress, it actually gives you motivation, grit, and resilience. For Jill and for other people, there's actually a lot of research that shows that teachers or therapists that work with high needs kids, they have huge burnout rates and they quit their jobs a lot faster than normal teachers because it can just feel like really tedious work. And it can be demotivating if you're not seeing progress. But Jill, she's incredibly motivated, incredibly passionate about her work because she regularly takes time to reference back on the progress, and she regularly sees those wins. She regularly sees progress. This first off allows her to appreciate her little kids more because she can actually see their own progress rather than just measuring them against where she hopes that they are in the future. So taking time to measure your progress is huge for your resilience. It helps you push through. It helps remind you that you can accomplish hard things, because if you're pursuing big goals, and by the way, the research is pretty clear on this, you want to have really high and hard goals. You want to have big goals. You want to be taking on mountains. But as you're climbing those steps, you want to regularly review your progress. This is what Dan Sullivan calls measuring the gain rather than the gap. You're going to want big goals. Big goals are the most motivating goals. But if you're always measuring yourself against some ideal in your future, then you're always going to be depressed. Again, that's what Dan Sullivan calls measuring the gap. You have clear goals, but as you make progress, you measure the gains. That gives you resilience, faith, hope, confidence that you can keep going, and it actually boosts your motivation to keep going. So now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to show you some of James Clear's annual reviews. And my reason for doing this is just to show you how thorough he's been and to provide you an example that you can maybe use for yourself. Maybe you can start reviewing your progress or creating some way of reviewing your progress every week, every month, every year. And then you can review it on a regular basis just to catch back up with your former self and to see how much you've changed. Because the truth is, you're not your former self. You're not the same person you used to be. You're not measuring success the same way. You've defined success differently. You live in a different world than your former self. What's normal for you right now may have been the dreams for your former self. And the same is true of your future self. What's going to be normal for your future self is the dreams of your current self. And you're going to eventually slow boil into that, and then you're going to forget how far you've actually come. So here's James Clear's page of his annual reviews. If you just go to jamesclear.com/annual review, and down below is a link to that. This is how he frames his annual reviews. Each year I write an annual review, which I share publicly. My annual reviews answers these questions. What went well this year? What didn't go so well? What am I working on right now? He actually, for some reason, didn't actually make one for 2020, it looks like. But I'm just going to show you some of these because it's so powerful. So he talks about what went well, writing. After years of inconsistency, this is the year I finally turned it around. I wrote a new article every Monday and Thursday. So this is when he first started blogging. He said, my first article was published in 2012. I'm proud to say that since then I've published 114 articles on my website, and I have 686,000 unique visitors. He's got 40,000 people on his newsletter at this time, and this was back at the end of 2013. He talks about traveling, weightlifting. These are his best lifts. He's got his snatch, his squat, his bench press. And then he talks about what didn't go well. Creating products. He wanted to create products. He wasn't that great at delegating. He wasn't that great at staying in touch with his family. And then he talks about what he's looking forward to. So I'm going to go out now, and I want to just show you some progress he's made. So at the end of 2013, he had 40,000 subscribers. His website had like 600,000 unique visitors. Well, let's go to 2014. Same model. What went well, what didn't go well. He said his writing went really well. He published new articles. His now website has 2.4 million visitors just that 1 year. His email subscribers are now in the hundreds of thousands. So that's pretty powerful. And now he's kind of measuring it even a lot smoother. He published 88 new articles that year. He got 70,000 new email subscribers. His website got that many visitors. Again, I want to tell you, the clarity of his measurement. You cannot improve or manage what you're not measuring. It's obvious that James Clear was measuring how many articles he was writing, how many views those articles got, how many email subscribers he was getting. He was really clear on what he was measuring, and that allowed him to make progress on his goals. So he talked about just his success in his traveling. He measured how many countries he went to, how many states. Again, here is his measurement for how many workouts he had. He worked out 7 times in January. So he was tracking the heck out of the things that mattered to him. So my question for you is, as you're looking at James Clear's annual reviews, first off, what are you measuring? Are you specifically measuring anything towards your future self, towards your goals? And are you taking time regularly to review your measurements and make sure you're actually making the progress you want? If you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. But if you're measuring it, it will improve. And if you're measuring and reporting it, as Pearson's law says, it will improve exponentially. So now I'm going to pop out here. I'm just going to show you 2015. We're just going to keep cruising through. So what went well this year? He got married. He got a book deal. He said in his 2014 review that one of his goals for 2015 was to turn pro as a writer, which for him meant getting a book deal. So this year he got a book deal. Here's how his writing went that year. He wrote 74 new articles. He got 150,000 new subscribers, which took him up to 200,000. His blog got almost 6 million unique visitors. And so now at that point in time, he had almost 9 million visitors since he launched it. Here's his strength training numbers. Here's his travel numbers. He talks about other things that he learned. He talks about what didn't go well. He talks about things that he was challenged on, the hamster wheel it looks like. So I'm just going to keep cruising through this because it's very fascinating. So what went well? He started hiring. He got an executive assistant. His business started to grow. He didn't write as many articles, but you can tell his focus was shifting. He was writing that book. So he got 200,000 new subscribers. His subscribers were now up almost to 400,000. Now his website is just getting insane views. And so again, what you measure improves. And so at this point, he was probably focused on writing his book. His travel's killing it. His weightlifting is improving. What didn't go well? He actually talks about the challenge of writing his book. And so it's just really interesting. This is a great model. I'm just going to finish one more time. I'm going to just look at the 2019 review. What went well this year? Book sales. So at that point, his book Atomic Habits actually had come out. He sold over 1.3 million copies in 2019, 12 consecutive months on the New York Times bestseller list. He's got all of these reviews. He's got all of these ratings. He's now speaking all over the world. He's got this new newsletter. He's got this huge audience growth. He wrote 5 articles in 2019. He got almost 400,000 new email subscribers. He's got like 600,000 email subscribers. His blog's been read 50 million times. And then he obviously has his other metrics of what he's going for. And there's some really important things to consider here. Number one, if you're still measuring the same things you were measuring like 5-7 years ago, that may be a question. One of the things I like about James Clears is that his current self is measuring slightly different things. Some of the things, he's still measuring some of the things he was measuring 5 years ago, but now he's measuring book sales, he's measuring speaking gigs, he's measuring things his former self wasn't measuring, and there's levels. There's actually a concept called a maturity model, and a maturity model is how a business knows if it's growing or whatnot, and at the different levels of the maturity model, there's different things you measure. So you may be at a beginner level, but once you get to an intermediate level, you're measuring different things. You're focused on different things. And then once you get to an advanced level, you're measuring even different things. And so I only share this with you because James Clear is an amazing example of someone who's been measuring the gain. He's been measuring his own progress. He's been public about his measurables. He's been specific about what he's been measuring. He's been explicit and public about what he's been measuring. And he's been improving insanely. His growth curve is very powerful. And I think he's really clear on his own maturity model. And so I invite you to take the time to measure your own progress, whether that be in the form of a journal, a log, annual reviews, monthly reviews, and take the time regularly to look back at where you were before. This is, again, what Dan would call measuring the gain. If you do this, you'll have a similar experience to what Jill had. Jill, the person who worked with the challenged youth. You'll have moments where you'll be reminded of what your former self was up to and what your former self was working on, and you'll realize how far you came. There's a lot of research on this subject out of Harvard. Daniel Gilbert has written a lot about the differences between your former and your current self and about how you've grown so much. You don't even realize how much you've grown compared to your former self unless you actually took some notes and look back on where you were actually at. You see the world differently. You are pursuing different things. You're measuring different things. You define success differently. And it's really powerful to look back sometimes and realize how much you've grown as a person. Again, the same is true of your future self. Your future self is going to be measuring things that you're not even currently aware of. Let me give an example. When I was 18 years old, I was playing a lot of World of Warcraft. That's what I was measuring. I was measuring how much progress I was making on my character in World of Warcraft. A couple years ago, I was measuring my own email subscriber growth. I was a writer. I was a blogger on Medium.com, and so I was measuring how many views I got on Medium.com and how many subscribers I was getting. Now I'm measuring how my books sell, and I'm measuring my income and my investments and my family. I'm measuring completely different things that my former self wasn't even aware of. My former self wasn't even aware of a lot of the things that now that I'm focused on, I'm measuring, and the same is going to be true of your future self. Right now, you are completely blind and unaware of a lot of the things that are very important to your future self, things that they're going to be measuring, things that they're going to be seeking to improve. And so the more you can visualize your future self and think about what's going to be important to them and what do they want to be visualizing, and then you create a maturity model where you think about how do I get from where I am to where I want to go and what are the different levels between where I'm at and where I want to go, then you can start to plan out a path. And having a path is really important. Research shows that having a path is key for having motivation and having hope. Actually, psychologists call it pathways thinking. You want to have a clear goal or goals, and you want to have a path that's workable, that's adaptive, but that gives you confidence that you're confident can get you there. And that path is the maturity model. It's the maturity model of where you are to where you want to go. And at different stages, there's going to be different things that you're focused on, different things that you're measuring, different things that you're worried about. What got you here won't get you there. James Clear is an amazing example of that. For a long time, at one stage of his maturity model, he was just writing a ton of blog posts. Then he got to a point where writing blog posts wasn't the thing he was focused on that much. Instead, he was writing that book. Then he launched that book, and his goal became to sell a ton of copies of that book and to get speaking gigs and to make tons of money. Now we have no clue what he's measuring because he's not publishing his reviews. But you can see that he was measuring different things and he was focused on different things along his own maturity model. And then he was publishing it and measuring his progress backwards, and he was sharing it publicly, which is really generous and really powerful of him. According to the Stanford psychologist, B.J. Fogg, design beats willpower. Design beats willpower. The truth is that willpower, there's a lot of research on this, is like a muscle, and it gets taxed fast. The more decisions you have to make in a given day, the quicker your willpower depletes, and your willpower all comes from a single source. So for example, if you wake up and you don't yet know what you're going to do in the morning, so for example, you want to go work out, but you haven't yet decided what you're going to do, then you got to start making all sorts of complex decisions. Where do I work out? Do I go to the gym? Am I going to go for a run? Am I going to work out my legs, my arms? All of those decisions burn out your willpower. And your willpower gets fried by the end of the day. And then ultimately, when your willpower is fried, you end up making very short-term, very low-level decisions. Usually they're high consumptive. You seek high consumption, high dopamine. For example, you're consuming crap media, you're consuming junk food. When your willpower is low, you consume high, and those high-level consumptions ultimately lead to long-term detriments. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about the single most effective way to overcome this willpower problem. So again, it goes back to design beats willpower. Sean Achor, the Harvard lecturer on positive psychology, has a concept he calls the 20-second rule. And basically what the idea of the 20-second rule is, if something takes 20 seconds for you to do, that's often enough friction for you not to do it. So for example, he wanted to start the habit of playing guitar. Like he thought, I want to get really good at guitar. We all know that our brains can change. Our brains are very plastic, very flexible, and you can develop new habits and you can develop a new brain. And so he got really excited about that, and he said, I want to get good at guitar. I want to build the habit of playing guitar, and I want that to become new levels in my brain. So he basically was going to set the goal of playing guitar for 21 days in a row, and he only ended up doing it for 4 days before he fell off. The problem was he was relying on willpower. He thought that willpower would be able to get him there, but ultimately, after a few days of trying, he fell back on what was the path of least resistance, which was his habits and his environment. Your habits and your environment are ultimately what you're going to fall back to when your willpower is fried. And so willpower ultimately loses to environment and habits. Habits and environment kill willpower any of the day of the week, and habits are very much trained and triggered by your environment. So one of the things that Sean Achor did to fix this is he ended up taking his guitar out of its regular spot, which was in the closet, and he put it right in the center of his room, in his living room where he played guitar. By changing that design, by changing that default. You want to change your defaults because your defaults, how you've set up your environment, ultimately lead you to default behavior. Just as an example on that. If you walk into your kitchen and if you changed the location of where the silverware was, you put it in a different drawer. For a while, you'd walk to the old drawer because that was the default option. So anyways, you can easily change your behavior by just shifting the default. But that's what he did. He put his guitar right in the middle of his room, and then it became very easy to just pick it up because it was right in front of him. That's one of the things that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits is in order to make a new habit, you've got to make it really easy. And in fact, if you want to get rid of a bad habit, you ultimately just want to make it hard to access. You want to apply the 20-second rule to bad habits as well. So one of the things that Sean Achor did when it came to TV, because he was an avid TV watcher and it was a bad habit of his, is he took the batteries out of his remote and he put the remote somewhere in some drawer so that it would take at least 20 seconds to go get it. So for a while, his habit was to go sit on the couch after a hard day of work, and he realized, he didn't have his remote sitting there very conveniently waiting on the desk. It would take him 20 seconds to go get it. And so instead, he redesigned the environment. He put a book there instead because he wanted to read a book. Or he had his guitar right there. Those then became the most easy default behaviors to go to instead of picking up the remote. And so once he changed his environment and he made the default to just easily pick up the guitar, he was able to play the guitar for 21 days straight. And you can apply this to your life as well. I mean, ultimately, think about it. The reason you get distracted so easily is because you've made the default to be distracted. Your cell phone is right next to your bed when you wake up. And so you pick it up, and it's so easy to open up all your apps and ultimately open them up and get distracted. If you wanted to break your bad habits, ultimately what you want to do is you want to make it harder to do them, and you want to make it easier to do the behaviors you want. And so you want to create friction points. Because the point is that human beings, we don't like friction. Any form of friction stops us from doing the behavior we want. So for example, you probably don't floss your teeth very much, even though you want to. My guess is that anyone watching this video, they probably would like to floss their teeth, but probably most of us don't. And the reason is because it takes too much energy, seriously, to just pull the little box out of the drawer, pull the string, cut it, and then floss. But if you remove that friction by just doing that the night before, and you had a piece of floss sitting literally right next to your toothbrush, and it was just sitting there, you would have removed the friction. And that's one of the things that BJ Fogg has found in habit design, is you ultimately want to make the behavior so easy you can't not do it. One of the other aspects of all of this is you want to remove what psychologists call decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is the idea that the more options you have and the more choices you make, the more it burns out your willpower. So you want to remove having to make decisions. One way to do that, again, is by just making it easy. For example, laying out the floss. You've made it so easy, you don't even have to make a choice. You just pick it up and go. When it comes to, for example, exercising in the morning, all you have to do is lay out the gym clothes the night before, lay out your water bottle, lay it all out so that you don't even have to think about it. You've actually made the decision the night before so that when you wake up, it's already there. You've made the choice the night before, you've laid out the environment. You don't have to wake up to your alarm clock and then think to yourself, what am I going to do right now? That's the easiest way to burn out your willpower, is to be in a situation where you now have to make the decision what to do. You want to remove decision fatigue. I love the quote from Michael Jordan. He said, once I made a decision, I never thought about it again. That's the easiest way to do it. You just make the situation easy so that you can automatically do what you want to do. You've already made the choice. You've designed the environment so it's easy, and that makes it so much better. So when it comes to creating positive habits, you ultimately need to change the default, just like Sean Achor did. Instead of having the remote control on the couch, he made that 20 seconds away. He made it hard. There was some form of friction to going and getting the remote control. He put a book there instead, and he put the guitar right next to his couch so that when he was done with work, he'd go sit on the couch. And then that's another concept called habit stacking. So like, for example, you know you're going to brush your teeth in the morning. That's probably a habit you've got. You can easily attach another habit to it, which would be flossing, by changing the default, putting floss right next to your toothbrush. That's what Sean did. His habit was after work, he was tired, so he'd go and sit on his couch. That was already an established habit. Then he just changed the default around that habit. Instead of having the remote control there, he had the book there and the guitar there. And so he could then stack on the habit of playing the guitar with sitting on the couch. As soon as he sat on the couch, oh, there's the guitar. Plays it for 10, 15 minutes. Then it becomes so easy to ingrain the new habit because you've changed the default. You've made it simple. You've made it easy. Just by having his guitar in the closet, that 20 seconds of friction of getting up, getting in the closet was enough for him not to be able to develop the habit. So when it comes to bad food, if you just change the default, remove it from your environment and make easy food. Again, James Clear discusses this in Atomic Habits, but the research on this subject has been available for 15, 20 years. Sean Achor wrote about it in his book 10 years ago. Put the healthy things right in front of you. Put the bowl of fruit, the apples on your counter rather than in the fridge. If they're just in the fridge, you're probably not going to do it. That's enough friction for you to burn out your willpower and not do it. But if you've just got it right in front of you, so ultimately you just want to make it so easy to do the behaviors you want, and you want to make it as hard as possible to not perform the behaviors you don't want. Remove all the junk apps off your phone. Maybe even put blockers on those websites or on those apps for various periods of time. Create rules so that only during a certain period of time are you going to check your email or check social media or do certain things like that. And then create systems, create an environment so that it's hard to actually go against those rules. If you can create 20 seconds of friction for the behavior you don't want, seriously, it's all you need is 20 seconds of friction for the behavior you don't want, chances are you won't do it. You'll just default to the easiest behavior possible. And you can design your environment, design your defaults so that the easiest behavior is ultimately the one you want to do. And as you accumulate small wins, you're going to build confidence. And as you build confidence, you're going to actually want to do the right behavior more and more. And then you'll start upgrading your environment even more. You'll start entirely removing things that you know are just bad for you. You'll stop being attracted to things you used to like, things that were ultimately bad for you. You'll stop being attracted to certain people, certain behaviors, certain habits. And then when you look at your current self and your current environment and your current lifestyle and your current results, and you compare it to who you were before, you'll be blown away by how different of a person you are versus the person you used to be. Then you'll be able to project forward on the person you want to be and think about who is my future self? Who's the person I want to be? Then you can start designing your environment, start designing your lifestyle, start designing your friends, start designing your situation so that becoming your desired future self is super easy. This is kind of the way of design approach, environment design, where you're creating an environment that's like a stream pulling you towards your future self, rather than being in a river where you're walking literally upstream. That's the willpower approach. In psychology, there's two types of motivation. Either there's push or there's pull. Push motivation means you have to literally push yourself to do it. It's something you're not intrinsically excited about. There's some form of friction, either internal or external, and so you got to push yourself really hard to do it. Whereas pull motivation means that the situation was made easy, you really want to do it, and so you're ultimately being pulled forward by it. And so you ultimately want to design your goals, your environment, your life, so that you've got pull motivation. It's already so easy that everything's been set up. You don't have to exert so much willpower. Instead, you've designed the defaults and you've ultimately created the optimal habits so that you can just do what you want to do without burning out all of your willpower. You've already made the decision in advance, so you don't have to make all these decisions here and now. Seriously, making decisions is costly. One final thought on removing decision fatigue, and that's a concept called Who Not How. This is a book that Dan Sullivan and I wrote, and this is a key concept if you're wanting to be a high performer, if you're wanting to be in flow a lot more, is offloading a lot of decisions that you used to make onto a who. I mean, you could do it onto technology as well. You could automate a lot of your habits, like let technology take care of it. Just like, for example, I don't actually wash my clothes. I stick them in a clothes washer. Like, that's a who for me. I don't actually do that behavior, but there's a lot of behaviors you probably do that are costing you a lot of thought. That if you were to invest in a who and save yourself that time, more importantly than saving time, you would be saving yourself the decisions. So just as one example, last year I actually went on to 300 podcasts when I was promoting this book, Personality Isn't Permanent. And originally I was going to be the one to schedule all those podcasts and things like that, but instead I hired a who. I hired someone for a very good deal, like they were a very capable person. But for me, and this is one of the reasons why people don't invest in who's, they think they can't afford it. Here's the problem with that philosophy though. You can't afford not to, because by hiring that who, they were able then to do all the scheduling for me. All I had to do was open my email on the day of podcast, click the link and show up. I didn't have to make the 5,000 micro decisions, emailing back and forth, deciding when we would do it, getting all the links. That's a lot of decision making, and decision making is very taxing on your energy. It's very costly. And if you can get other people to make a lot of the decisions for you in your life, the micro decisions, you ultimately set the target, you set the goal. But if you can get other people to make a lot of the decisions that are involved, you free yourself up so much. You don't have to have decision fatigue, and ultimately you can be in a flow state, focusing on the few things that matter most. So part of changing defaults is ultimately getting other who's in place so that you don't have to even think about it anymore. Again, once I made a decision, I never had to think about it again. By getting a single who, I never had to think about scheduling my emails again. I've also got a who for answering my emails. There's so many things you can delegate or outsource so that you don't have to burn out your willpower, your decision fatigue. You've removed so many decisions so that you can actually place your energy and your thoughts on bigger picture things. And you can be in a flow state in the key areas of your life, such as creativity or being with your family. This is how you can ultimately accomplish 10 times more, but while working less, while being enormously more recovered. You can recover because you don't have to constantly be the one doing all the how. And you don't have to make all those decisions. Instead, you've designed an environment, you've created defaults, you've offloaded a lot of decisions, and you've then made the default to ultimately be in a flow state and to be where you want to be. Jim Rohn said, you should have the goal to be a millionaire, but not for the $1 million, but rather for what it will make of you to become a millionaire. It will require you to become a different person, a more capable, a smarter, a wiser, a better planner. You will have to learn a lot of things to get from where you are to where you want to be, and that's the key reason why you should have that as a goal. I completely agree with Jim Rohn. And in this video, I'm going to share with you 6 habits that you can implement that will help you get whatever you want in life, whether that's millions of dollars or any other goal that you want. 2 key principles I want to describe before I go into the 6 habits. One is deliberate practice. There's a lot of research on this subject. Deliberate practice is how you can develop skills and expertise in any subject. And the research is really clear. And there's a book by Anders Ericsson. He's the guy who's been studying high performers for the last 30 years. And what he's found is that we all have very adaptive brains. None of us have just an innate potential, but rather our potential as human beings is flexible. And most things can be trained. In other words, you can train and become world class at chess or at tennis or at finance. But you need to actually define what you want. So you have to have a clear vision of your future self, and then you have to have specific skills and attributes that you want to develop. Then you need coaching, teaching, and mentoring from people who are already there who can get you there. But there is a process and a way for you to develop the skills you have to get to where you want to go. The second concept is called prospection. And prospection is the idea that as human beings, our lives are driven by the views that we have of our own future. Whatever future you see for yourself, that's the thing actually guiding and driving your behavior in the present. And so that's super important to realize that your current behavior, your mindset, your identity is being driven by your view of your own future. And as human beings, we create futures and then we use those futures to drive our present. You know, if I am a college student and I want to see myself graduating, I use that view of my future self graduating to drive my actions, my decisions, my planning in the present. That's what makes us conscious human beings. It's absolutely amazing. But then it puts the impetus on you. You have to decide the future you want, and then you have to use that future to drive your present. And it's up to you whatever future you pick, but whatever future you pick, that's what drives you. And that takes me to habit number 1. You have to decide what you want. People who are successful, they're proactive. They begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say. They decide what they want. They make decisions. They own their human right to make choices. And I'm not saying that you have pure free will and that you can make yourself fly, but you can choose what you want. And as Neil Maxwell said, whatever you desire over time, you eventually become. So you have to decide what you want, and you need to define it and be explicit about it. And what you want is based on what you value, and what you value is based on what you give meaning to. And ultimately, you are a meaning-making machine as a human being, and it's your choice to give whatever you give meaning to. But the key aspect here is that you first have to make the choice. What do you want, and who are you going to be? That's your choice. And the more you own that, the more that you can define your own desires, define your own ambitions, define your own goals, rather than all the goals of other people. You grew up in a certain environment, in a certain context, with parents, with culture, and with friends and peers, and it's easy to not to not define what you want, but to just fall into whatever your friends like, or what your parents wanted you to do. Or if you had failures, to lower your vision and your goals for yourself. You have to define what you want and at the level you want. I remember when I first decided I wanted to be an author, I decided I wanted to be a professional author. No one told me that I could be an author. No one told me I couldn't be. I wasn't a good student. I barely graduated from high school. But now I've got all these books that I've written, and it was because I decided to. I decided to become smart. I decided to start reading hundreds of books because that was something I grew to value and want. And then I just decided that's what I want to do. I want to write 50 books in my life. That's just a desire that I have. But that's something that I get to choose. And what you think of me doesn't matter, but also same with you. What other people think of you doesn't matter. You have to decide what you want and what life you're going to live and who you're going to become. That's habit number 1. Habit number 2 is this. Once you've defined what you want, you must then very heavily study and learn from people who are already doing it at the level you want to. So this goes back to deliberate practice. Deliberate practice, one of the key aspects of deliberate practice, which is really interesting and unique, is the key aspect of deliberate practice isn't actually engaging in the activity. So for example, if you want to get really good at tennis, playing tennis, yes, that's a part of practice, but that's not the most important part of deliberate practice. You can go out and play tennis and not get any better. You could play tennis for 10,000 hours and not get any better. The key aspect of deliberate practice is intensely studying, mostly on your own, the people who are at the highest level doing what you want to be doing. So the best form of deliberate practice, if you're a tennis player, would be to study the film, to really study in slow motion, like let's just say Roger Federer, Venus and Serena Williams, like really watch, really study, really analyze, and then take what you learn and maybe get a coach and get coached on implementing and applying at that level so that when you actually do train, you're improving. Rather than just repeating the same mistakes over and over again, you're actually getting better. There's a book called The Little Book of Talent by Daniel Coyle, and that's the first thing he talks about. And there's a lot of research again on this. The people who become high performers, they are obsessive and they study and they're staring at and watching the people who are doing whatever they want to be doing at that level. So if your goal, for example, is to make money, a lot of money, you need to study the people who are doing that, really learn from them, learn what they do, learn how they think. Like that needs to become your focus. Again, most people, there's that whole quote that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Most people, they're studying, analyzing, examining their peers. That is a horrible way to get good at something. You need to study and analyze and obsess on the people you want to become like. I remember when I first started writing blog posts, as an example, I started studying the heck out of the blog posts that I knew had gotten millions and millions of views. I would go and find the viral articles, and I would study meticulously. How is the headline structured? How is the article structured? Like, how is this written? I would just study it. Study the craft. And so whatever it is you want, you need to study those at the level that you want to be at. And you need to really understand in and out how it works. Another key aspect of that is actually getting coaching. People who get where they want to go, they invest in themselves. They invest in themselves and they invest in teachers, mentoring, and they get coaching and they get feedback on how they're doing. And if you want to get to a high level, you need to invest in yourself, even small investments. Just as another example, I remember when I first started blogging online, I paid $199 for an online course that taught me how to write headlines and structure my articles. So you can start small. You can start $100, get a coach. You know, I'm getting into running right now, and I'm investing in that. I'm investing in a running coach because I want to do it better and I want to do it right. And it can be a small investment or a big investment, but the more invested you become, the more committed you become. And commitment is a key aspect of creating results. There's an amazing quote in the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And what they say is that commitment is a statement of what is. You can know what you're committed to by your results, not by what you say your commitments are. And so basically the idea is what you say you want is not what you're committed to. What you actually are getting on a consistent basis is what you're committed to. And so that's why investing in yourself is big, is because, and there's a lot of research on this as well, investment precedes commitment. In other words, commitment follows investment. Whenever you invest in something, you then become more and more committed to it. And if you're getting coaching by someone who's an expert on that subject, they can help you advance more quickly. So there's 2 aspects of that. First off, study the heck out of the people who are where you want to be. And then second off, actually get training and mentoring, ideally by people who are already where you want to be. Okay, that then takes us to the 3rd habit. The 3rd habit is that you are continually refining your identity and your values through learning. Basically, you need to continuously be learning, reading lots of books, having new experiences, meeting new people, facing failures. Your view of your future is what drives who you are. And you need to ultimately have a lot of learning so that you can set bigger and newer and better goals. Constantly be learning, refining your perspective. That is a crucial aspect of becoming successful, of becoming a millionaire, or achieving any goal is constantly learning. There's a really good ratio that I've heard, and that's that as far as entertainment and education, you should probably have the 80-20, 80% education versus 20% entertainment. Very important to have entertainment, very important to have relaxing. Another aspect of that, though, is the whole idea of sharpening the saw. So there's the quote from Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln said, if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, he'd spend the first 5 hours sharpening the saw or sharpening the axe so that it's easy to cut down the tree. Well, that's how your brain works. You want to actually spend 80% of your even working time learning versus just chopping. A lot of people, they're just chopping, and they're chopping with a dull blade. That's like going out and playing tennis, as an example, with your current skills. Sharpening the saw would be learning, refining, studying again those who are at where you want to be. So just to clarify 1s, 2, and 3, define what you want at the level you want, study those who are up there, get mentoring ideally by people who are up where you want to be, and then continuously learn, refine, and prune, sharpen that axe. And as you constantly learn, your values, your goals, and your very identity will change. Think about it. What would happen if you read 1,000 insanely powerful books? You would see yourself, you'd see the world differently. You'd value things differently. You'd be approaching things differently. You would not have your current goals. Let's just say that. You would be approaching things very differently. So you have to constantly be learning and letting go of your former views that are ultimately keeping you at your current level. Because your future self sees things differently than you see them. Your future self has learned things that you haven't learned. They value things you don't currently value. They know things you don't know, and therefore they can make better decisions than you can currently make. All right, that now takes us to habit 4, which is to continually stretch yourself through new experiences. So there's a great quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., and he said that a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its former dimensions. A mind that has been stretched by a new experience can never go back. One of my favorite stories on this subject comes from the famous chef Charlie Trotter. Charlie Trotter had a restaurant in Chicago. It was fine dining, 3 Michelin stars. Oprah loved the restaurant. People came from all over the world to eat at this guy's restaurant. They had a wait list forever, and it was one of those meals that was hundreds of dollars, multiple courses, just absolutely mind-blowing, pristine food. And here's what's really interesting about Charlie Trotter is that regularly when the restaurant was closed, for example, like during various hours, he would bring in groups of homeless kids from Chicago and give them the full experience. He wouldn't just give them food. He would give them the full experience, the full courses, just blow their minds and just completely give them some experience that they didn't even know was possible. He was stretching their view of reality. So Stephen Covey has this amazing quote. He says, "We see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we've been conditioned to see it." None of us see the world the same way. We all have been conditioned to see our own subjective reality. And so what Charlie Trotter was doing was he was taking these kids and exposing them to something completely beyond anything that they had ever experienced. And he got a lot of flack for it. A lot of people, they criticized Charlie Trotter. How dare you give these kids this experience? You're creating unrealistic expectations for them. There's no way that they're going to be able to have what you've just shown them. And he didn't care because what he was doing, and as he stated, he wanted to give the kids new goals. He wanted to expand their perspective of what was possible for them. There's a great quote, 2 great quotes. One from Albert Einstein, "Imagination is more important than knowledge," but also from Napoleon Hill. He said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve." You have to conceive it, which means you've got to have had the most expansive experiences. Those kids, when they went into Charlie Trotter's restaurant and they had that peak experience, and peak experiences are required to becoming self-actualized, their views of what was possible completely expanded, which expanded their ability to imagine bigger futures. And he would get letters, by the way. Charlie Trotter would get letters from the kids saying, "Thank you so much. I want to now open a restaurant," or "Thank you for giving me that experience. I now believe in myself." So you are like the kids in Charlie Trotter's restaurant. You are limited by what you know. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are, or as you've been conditioned to see it. And you need to regularly have those peak experiences which stretch your mind so that it can never go back to its former dimensions. Well, there's a lot of research on this subject. As people age, they usually become less and less open to having new experiences. A lot of research shows that people in their teens and in their 20s, their personalities change more than any other period of their life, not because that's when they're most pliable, but that's because that's when they're having the most new, fresh experiences, and they're seeking a bigger future. First time on a date, first time in a job, first time living on your own, first time this, first time that. Well, when was the last time you had a first-time experience? You know, you need to continually stretch yourself, put yourself in new environments, put yourself around new people, put yourself under new conditions, and stretch yourself. One of the reasons why people don't seek new experiences is because either they're physically or emotionally difficult or uncomfortable. Think about it. For example, taking an ice cold shower, or even more, jumping into like an ice lake, like having an intense experience. It opens you up. Obviously you want to do it safely, but people avoid new things because it's outside their comfort zone. Actually, what they say is the foundation of all fears is uncertainty. The reason people are uncomfortable with new experiences is because they're uncertain. Our brain is literally a prediction machine. Our brain is designed to form memories so that we can predict the outcomes of our behaviors. Well, when you're having new experiences, you can't accurately predict those outcomes. And so then you experience the fight or flight. You start experiencing anxiety, uncertainty, uncomfort. And so you quickly revert back to your comfort zone. Well, you need to get more and more what's called psychologically flexible, getting better and better at being out of your comfort zone and having mind expansive stretching experiences, because then that gives you confidence, but it also, like the kids in Charlie Trotters, it stretches your imagination of what's possible. So that's habit number 4, is that you need to continually stretch yourself through peak experiences, through having new experiences and through seeking new experiences, so that you can then have new possibilities. Habit number 5 is that you continually expand yourself through higher and higher quality relationships. There's a theory in psychology called the self-expansion model. And basically what the idea is that as human beings, our ability to produce results, that's what they call efficacy, is not innate, but it's rather contextual and relational. In other words, my ability to produce results in my life is based on the resources I have to put towards those goals, and the resources I have to put towards those goals are based on the relationships I have. So let me give a really simple example. When my wife and I were graduate students, we became foster parents of 3 kids. Those kids came from a really bad background. They came from basically living in the ghetto in a trailer park in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, and their potential in that context was very limited. They didn't have the resources to put towards their goals. They couldn't go to school because their parents were on drugs. Their parents didn't have very much knowledge to give to them, so that they couldn't have good goals, but they didn't have money or time or energy to put towards anything. And so their potential is very limited. Once you put them into a new environment, a new context, and my wife and I were far from perfect parents, but we had far more resources to give to these kids, so their potential as a human being immediately expanded, because your potential is based on who you're in a relationship with, because who you're in a relationship with determines the resources you have, whether that be knowledge, time, energy, love, money, the resources you have to put towards your goals. So you have more efficacy as a person based on the resources you have to put towards those goals, and those resources come through relationships. So once we got our 3 kids, they were all at least a year behind in school. And we got them tutors. We got them on sports teams. We got them in church. They had new friends. They had expanded family, cousins, grandparents. We traveled with them. We helped give them peak experiences. Traveled all over the United States. They had never been out of their state. We took them all over the place and showed them a new world. We also gave them our worldview, our belief system, our energy, our care. We got them routines. So they had all sorts of resources, including our knowledge, our belief system, our love, our care, that then expanded their potential. And now at this point, they're not only caught up, but they're above the curve, because they now have more resources to put towards their goals, which expands their potential. And you are the same way. Your potential is based on who you're in a relationship with. What you can do with some people is very different from what you can do with other people, and who you are in relation to some people is different from who you are. So if you start surrounding yourself with different mentors, with different friends, with different people, you start stretching your ability. Your potential as a person is expanded as you develop higher quality relationships. And people who continually grow in their life, they're continually surrounding themselves and creating connections and collaborations with higher and higher quality people. And this is something I can definitely say I've applied, but I can even apply it enormously better, because you take massive leaps when you start creating transformational relationships with the right people. There are transformational relationships and there's transactional relationships. People who are low level generally have transactional relationships where it's just all about giving and taking. You just get whatever you can get. It's more 50-50, whereas transformational relationships, you create relationships for the purpose of self-expansion, for the purpose of growth, for the purpose of change. And when two very high level people are entering in those types of relationships, the goal is that you both come out different people with different capabilities and different potential. And just as one simple example, I used to be a lot more individualistic. I worked on books by myself, and I still work on books by myself. But, this is a book that I co-authored with a guy named Dan Sullivan, who I wanted to develop a transformational relationship with. He's 76 years old. He's got a company called Strategic Coach, which is the #1 entrepreneurial coaching company in the world. And he's been coaching high-level entrepreneurs for 45 years. I believe he knows more about it than anyone on the planet. And I wanted to develop a relationship with him because I knew if I was in a relationship with him, based on what he knew, his resources, not just his network, but his knowledge, I would be a different person if I had access and a close connection with him. And so I developed a transformational relationship with him, which led to the writing of this book and multiple books to come in the future. So you can develop collaborative, powerful, transformational relationships in the form of business, in the form of anything. It could be, my wife is a transformational relationship. She's got knowledge, skills, capabilities, resources that I just could never have. And I bring the same thing. We both bring different things to the table. Habit number 6, which I've slightly covered already, is invest heavily in whatever goal you have for your future. So for example, if you want to succeed in any area, let's just give tennis. The more invested you become in that, the better and faster you'll grow in that area. I already talked about how I invest massively in myself as a writer, but right now I want to get better at running, and so I'm investing in that. For the first time, I've never invested in running coaching before. So people who grow, people who succeed, people who continually expand, they're investing more and more in themselves. You're the ultimate investment in yourself, and you never want to view investing in yourself as a cost, because you're not a cost. You're an investment, and when you invest in something, you become a higher level potential. You're not just... When you invest in yourself, your potential expands, it grows, and you ultimately can do it. Think about it from the self-expansion model perspective I just gave. When I take myself and I now combine myself with a really high-level running coach, now my potential changes because I now have the resources of that high-level running coach. And so invest in your future self and invest at the level of your future self. The more invested you become, the more committed you are. And the more committed you are, the more your results start to change. So those are 6 habits of... Those are 6 millionaire habits, just straight up. Writing in your journal every single day is one of the most powerful keystone habits you can have. But in this video, I'm going to share with you a specific way to prompt or trigger yourself into the right frame of mind so that while you're journaling, you can actually journal from the right state. Whatever state of mind you're in is going to determine how you feel about something. And so while you're journaling, you ultimately want to get yourself into the right frame of mind first so that while you're journaling, you can get all sorts of creative insights and clarity. So real quick, before I even tell you the 5 questions, because there's 5 questions and you put them at a specific place in your journal and you read them right before you journal every morning, and it triggers you to think like your future self. But really quickly, before I tell you those 5 questions, I just want to give a quick little bit of background. So Joshua Waitzkin, he is an amazing guy. He wrote the book, The Art of Learning. One of the things he talked about in an interview with Tim Ferriss is that, and this isn't new information, Josh isn't the only one who does this. A lot of people do this, but when you go to bed, you want to ultimately think about your future self. Napoleon Hill even talks about this in Think and Grow Rich. You want to think about whatever it is you want your mind to work on, and why, as Thomas Edison said, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. While you're sleeping, your mind is doing all sorts of amazing processing, and the first thing you do in the morning really has an impact on, the direction your day goes. And so the worst thing you could do is ultimately look at your phone and start scattering your brain with inputs. Inputs mean, your input shapes your outlook. And so if you train yourself to be reactive to, for example, email, social media, all sorts of random things, then you've ultimately trained yourself to being distracted on a daily basis, and you've set the tone for your day. Rather than doing that, Josh, and this is so brilliant, and I've been doing this for years myself, he goes to a quiet place and he outputs. He dumps out the things that his subconscious has been processing. And so ultimately, when you wake up in the morning, you want to write about your goals. You want to write about the problems you're trying to solve. You want to write about what you're trying to accomplish. But even before you do that, I recommend a quick pre-performance routine. You want to get yourself into the right frame of mind so that while you're actually dumping your thoughts, while you're writing about your goals, while you're visualizing your future self, while you're getting yourself into the right frame of mind, while you're journaling about what you're trying to accomplish, you want to click yourself into the right frame of mind. So Dr. Robert Cialdini, is one of the most prolific psychologists on the subject of persuasion. And one of the things he recommends is that you actually learn how to persuade yourself. And in order for a person to be persuaded, they actually have to be persuaded. He has a book called Persuasion. And basically what persuasion means is that the mindset that you're in the first place determines whether or not you're actually going to be able to be persuaded. So for example, marketers will give you a screen, and on that screen there's going to be all sorts of things that make you feel a certain way so that when they actually provide the message, it's going to hit home. So you want to actually put yourself in the right frame of mind before you try to persuade yourself. Journaling is actually an amazing way to persuade yourself. One of the things you can do, for example, Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach, he wrote every day in his journal for 25 years exactly what he wanted. And he persuaded himself to believe that he could have it. Even, I forget his name, Scott Adams, the guy who does the Dilbert series. For years, he wrote affirmations in his journal saying, I'm going to be a famous cartoonist. I'm going to be a famous cartoonist. Or he said something like that. So he was persuading his subconscious about what he wanted. And so you can use your journal to persuade yourself what to do. And you can use your journal to commit yourself to doing what you want to do. And ultimately to committing and desiring your future self. But you want to set the stage before you convince yourself, or before you write in your journal, before you pull off all those subconscious ideas. And that's where these 5 questions come in. So on the front cover of your journal, and I just started a new journal, so I don't even have them all written yet, but I recommend you have 5 questions on the inside cover of your journal that you then use as a prompt. You then use them to trigger and remind you of a few things. So here are the 5 questions. The first one is, where am I right now? And then you just ultimately have a few bullets. You have a few bullets of describing ultimately your situation. So for example, it's a new year. I'm filming this at the beginning of 2021. Launching a product, writing a few books, and I'm specific about what I'm writing, getting back into running, getting into creating YouTube videos, better turning off and being present at home. So I'm just writing about where I'm at right now situationally, what I'm working on, what I'm focused on, what I'm thinking about, what I'm doing. It's really nice to just say, where are you right now? And here's what's really interesting. By the way, when you have these 5 questions in the front of your journal, all you have to do, I could go back to any of my journals from 3-5 years ago and just open up the front cover, and I can then see where I was at then. The next question is, this is question number 2, what are my wins from the last 90 days? So just have bullets. Just think about, and this is a really good concept. This is what Dan Sullivan calls the gain and the gap. But you want to regularly remind yourself of the wins, the progress you're making. You always want to be measuring yourself against your former self because that allows you to recognize the progress you're making. So just make a list of 5 to 10 bullets of what are the things personally and professionally that you've accomplished, wins from the last 90 days. If you take the time to do this, you're going to actually appreciate and recognize that you've probably done more in the last 90 days than you gave yourself credit for. It actually not only allows you to remember the past better, but it also allows you to remember the past more. It allows you to appreciate your past and use your past as a springboard for bigger futures, whereas most people, they don't take the time to appreciate all that they're accomplishing. So question number 2 is, what are the wins from the last 90 days? Question number 3 is, what are the wins I want for the next 90 days? So write down just what are the things you want to accomplish in the next 90 days. Set of 5 bullets or whatever it is you want to list, 3 to 5 bullets. What are the things you're ultimately trying to accomplish or you would like to see happen in the next 90 days? Then the next question is, where do you want to be 1 year from now? So in 12 months, where do you want to be? And just write a list. Where do you want to be in 12 months? Just your 1 year goal. And then the 5th question is, where do you want to be in 3 years from now? So you could put a specific date. So for example, right now, because I'm near the beginning of 2021, I put, where do I want to be on January 1 of 2022? That's my 1 year goal. And just write a list of what you want. And then the next one for the 3 year vision is, where do I want to be on January 1st of 2024? Now, if you have those in your front cover, it's really powerful because then you can just look at the front cover. You can see where you're at. You can see your wins from the last 90 days. You can see what you're trying to accomplish right now, your short-term goals. You could see your bigger goals, and ultimately you can see your 3-year, longer-term goals. You can just click it. You look at it for like 10 to 20 seconds, and then it just re-reminds you of your future self. It re-reminds you of the victories you've had in the last 90 days, which gives you a sense of confidence. You use that as your pre-performance, pre-suasion routine, and then you write from the perspective of your future self. You write from the perspective of faith and confidence that you're going to actually accomplish what you want. And it allows you to operate and write in the morning about your goals and about everything you're trying to do from a much higher standpoint. Another thing that's really cool is that once you actually have stacks of journals with this, you can go back and look at just that one page and see what you were up to. You could see where you were at. You could see what your wins were around that time. I love going back to a journal like 3 to 5 years ago and seeing what my wins were from that one small period of time, what I was trying to accomplish at that time, what my goals were long and short term. It's fun to see that. And if you've got stacks of journals, I go through about one journal every 20 days. I looked at all of my journals from 2020 and I just read what my yearly goals were on the one section, my question number 4. And it's amazing. All of them got accomplished but one in 2020. The only one that didn't get accomplished is that I thought I was going to sell 1 million copies of this book and dramatically didn't do that. My strategy for that was not effective. This is a book that came out in 2020. But one of the things I did want to do is I wanted to sell 100,000 copies of this book. One thing that's crazy that I wrote down, and this was before my wife even got pregnant, is I wrote down that my wife would get pregnant, that we'd have our 6th kid. That was before my wife and I even started talking about it. And then my wife ended up getting pregnant in, I think, March. But looking back at like the December of 2019, the January of 2020, and the February of 2020, I was already starting to like mentally create. And there's a great quote from Stephen R. Covey that mental creation always precedes physical creation. I actually have a video where I've broken down entirely the 3 steps of mental creation and the 3 steps of physical creation. So you always need to visualize it first. As Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. So this is just a great way, these 5 questions in the front cover of your journal, to prime your mindset very quickly. And you can use it as a trigger. Eventually you can use it to click you into the mindset of your future self. And then you can journal from a higher plane of state. And because you're at a higher state of mind while you're journaling, you're going to ultimately pull a lot more powerful nuggets from your subconscious while you're journaling. You're going to be able to write from a more elevated state, which is going to bring better ideas to your mind while you're journaling, which is ultimately going to allow you to have more inspiration, more flow, more excitement, so that you can take better action. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Down below is a link to my free 30-day Future Self course. And soon some videos will pop up with some other amazing videos for strategies to help you become your desired future self. Have an amazing day.